House Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the IPCC released their latest synthesis report. In order to reduce global warming, we need to act urgently within this decade. The report makes it clear, avoiding the worst case scenarios is only possible if we stop the expansion of new oil, gas, and coal development. Despite the science, the warnings by experts, and the evidence around all of us of the climate collapse, this government just approved new fossil fuel projects, Cedar LNG, and they gave the Kasai Lism's LNG proposal the green light to enter into the environmental review process. The more that governments like this one delay action, greenwashing fossil fuels, the more catastrophic the outcomes of climate change will be, especially, Mr. Speaker, for marginalized people. There's no such thing as clean fossil fuels. This government should be ashamed of themselves for trying to and attempting to greenwash LNG. The IPCC report tells us clearly climate plans that expand fossil fuel development are not good enough. Our survival is at stake. Through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, how does the Minister justify approving new LNG projects in the province when the science is clear that we must stop expanding fossil fuel infrastructure?
Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. And to the member, we're proud of the plans we've put in place across all sectors to reduce emissions and meet our legislated targets. And many people in British Columbia, credible commentators, many people across the country, and in fact, many people in other governments in North America laud the BC government for having the most comprehensive climate action program in North America. Honourable Speaker, the member and I respect his concern about climate change, and for many months now, the member and his colleague have been saying, what are you going to do about emissions from the oil and gas industry? How can you meet your targets if you're continuing to have fossil fuel projects? And what I said to the member is, we have a sectoral target, 33 to 38% reduction in emissions from the oil and gas sector by 2030. We're committed to that target, and we will have more to say about how we are going to meet that target. And Honourable Speaker, on the 14th of this month, we released the new Energy Action Framework that said very clearly, we are going to bring in a regulated cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector in consultation with First Nations and industry to ensure that we meet our sectoral emission reduction targets, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
House Leader, Third Party, supplemental.
We have a Minister of Energy, but when we ask questions about energy, the Minister of Energy won't stand up. Instead, it's the Minister of the Environment. The fact of the matter is that on that same day, just a couple of hours before, this government approved a new LNG proposal, a new LNG project that does not meet. There's only two members in this place that aren't clapping for that. Everybody else in this place is clapping for new fossil fuel development in a climate emergency. Whatever.
Members, let's hear the question.
The Minister of the Environment talks about the comprehensive plans. The Minister of the Environment knows that we're not meeting the targets that we have set. The 2030, the 2050 targets, we're missing those. We can have all the more comprehensive plans that we want, but if we're not committed to meeting those targets, which this government has proven that they're not prepared to do, the plans don't mean anything, Mr. Speaker. The fact is that in that energy action framework, the emissions cap and the net zero requirements that are laid out there have absolutely no substance to them. So you can say we're going to go through with negotiations, with consultations, we're going to develop those later down the road. They still don't have any substance to them, Mr. Speaker. We cannot afford a government that is prepared to continue greenwashing LNG, pretending like this fossil fuel is clean. There's no such thing as clean fossil fuels. Through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, he knows that expanding the fossil fuel industry and tackling climate change are fundamentally at odds with each other. Why does his government believe that they are exempt from this reality?
Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the House Leader of the Third Party and the member for Saanich and North Islands for raising the questions. First of all, the Minister of Environment, Climate Change Strategy and I work very closely together on these issues because we know that the issues of energy and environment and meeting our climate action targets are intrinsically linked. That's why it's important that we continue to do this work together. Mr. Speaker, we very carefully considered the environmental assessment on the project that was undertaken by the Environmental Assessment Office. This included extensive consultation with First Nations, consideration of climate action targets, working with HYSLA and the Cedar LNG project to understand and know how they are going to take every action possible to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, signing a memorandum of understanding with the project to reach near zero emissions by 2030. We know at the same day, of course, we announced the Energy Action Framework, and that this is an important signal to the sector at large to say we need to meet these targets. We know British Columbians want to do this. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I just returned from a trip up to the northwest portion of BC. I was in Kitimat, I was in Terrace, I was in Smithers. I was hearing from people and talking to them about these projects. Mr. Speaker, the regulatory cap on emissions that my colleague here spoke of, that work is underway. It is work we are going to do with industry, with First Nations, in consultation with communities, hearing from them so that we can set the regulations in place. But Mr. Speaker, it's not all that we're doing. The other part of the Energy Action Framework, of course, is the incentivizing and moving towards a clean energy future that all British Columbians want us to be a part of. The world is looking at us here in British Columbia on how we can do this work. We are going to do it with the BC Hydro Task Force. We are going to do this. We're moving towards a low carbon focused future, Mr. Speaker, one that is prosperous for all British Columbians and means so much for First Nations and communities. Thank you.